Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to part 2 of the eco-printing on cotton, linen and paper. I've just got the bundle out of the pot. You see it's still steaming. Look at the colour on it. Do you see that beautiful orange? Now I'm going to leave it to cool and then I'm going to open it. Now it's quite late the same evening that I filmed part 1, so I'm not going to open it this evening because it's nearly my bedtime. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, I've got some old plastic sheet that I have saved, excuse me, I'm going to put that over it just to keep it moist and then put the old towel over that. And then I'm going to open it tomorrow. Some people like to let them go dry to open them. I prefer to open them damp. I could equally open it straight away the minute it's cool enough to touch. The other thing I'm going to do, I just want to show you, is there's a lot of colour in there. I'm going to add the rest of those onion skins. This is just how I roll. I'm making it up as I go along. I'm going to add the rest of those into there. And I'm going to bring that up again to warm. It's still got the iron in and everything. And I'm going to put those leftover bits of cloth in there that are mordanted. Just, you know, to see what colour I get. So I'll do that and I'll show you that later in the video as well. I'm going to bring that back up and just let it for half an hour and then turn it off and leave it to sit overnight with the cloth in there. So I'm going to bring it back up to the boil with the cloth in for half an hour, and then turn the heat off and leave it all to sit overnight and then get the cloth out in the morning. So I'll show you all that a little bit later. This is the best fun in the world, in my view, the unbundling. So I've got it in this old tray because I'm inside at my desk and I don't want to make a mess. I would strongly recommend, if you have any sensitivities in your hands or certainly any little cuts or wounds in your hands, that you wear gloves. I don't, and I know I'm not sensitive to this sort of stuff, so I'm not wearing gloves. So I do this slowly, so I'm not going to, pull everything off and chuck it away willy-nilly. I'm going to go slowly. So this is for those of you who like to watch things slow. I like, for example, to undo the knots if I can, rather than cut, but I might have to cut, because I do remember when I was tying everything up that I made lots of knots, because I was using leftover little lengths of string. I've got that one undone. See, that feels like a little victory when you get a knot undone. So I'm just going to unwind. I've met another knot already. Hopefully I've got you low enough so you can see, but not so low that I'm going to flick soggy string out on you. Now this was cooked yesterday and then I kept it overnight covered with an old bit of plastic just to keep it damp. I'll see as I go if the leaves are coming off nicely. Now I know that other eco printers prefer everything to get bone dry before they unbundle. They say that for them is easier to get off. For me, especially with paper, I prefer things to be wet. I'm going to cut that, I really can't undo it. Yeah, so there's a short end, so if I cut that just there, I'll only lose that little end. Which is tied to that. Saving bits of string. Oh dear. And I haven't got my bowl to put my leaves in, I might have to go and get that in a minute. So, because as with my slow stitching, this is as much about the process as it is about the end result. So I just like to take the time and see the marks emerging. For here, for example, as I take the string off. Look at the colours and the shapes. And how many knots did I make? How many knots did I make? Yeah, I'm going to cut that as well. And that. It's very possible that if you weren't watching I would try to undo the knots, but You see I'm winding the string up rather than just throwing it to one side. What's happened? Oh, Stella's tennis ball's gone under the sofa, which happens several times a day, if not several tens of times a day. No, I'll get it for you in a little while. I'm doing this now. There's a good girl, settle down. You've been out, you've had your tea. I might have to, the trouble is now, look at my hands. And I've also timed this hopefully so that by the time I have to make next Monday's video, my hands will have recovered somewhat from the staining. Okay, so I'm back to my beginning knot, so I'm going to cut that there. Because this string as well, I sometimes wash this and use this, as, you know, when it's been coloured by these processes. That's lovely to use as well. So you can stop it now. You can twine it with cloth to make cloth twine, or you can just use it as it is, you know, for journal closures. You can couch it onto your slow stitch projects, all that kind of thing. Right, now this last little bit I am just going to cut. So it's only a little short length. And I can still save those little bits. There we go. So that's all the string off. I'm just going to set that all to one side onto my old towel that I've got protecting my desk. I'm just going to go and get the bowl to put my leaves in. Right, there you go, and don't let it go under there again. Okay, I've got an old bowl to put my leaves in. I'll put it out of shot because, pardon me, I'll put it out of shot because it's stainless steel, so it'll be shining at you. Okay, so here we go. So I like to just explore, because bearing in mind there's wet paper in here which will be fragile, gently to see where I can peel away most easily. And that's that bit of cotton packaging that came from India, and that's got those beautiful string marks. Now everything will dry lighter obviously when it's washed and dried. So, you know, don't get too, don't be disappointed when that happens, you know, just expect that as you look. Conversely, if you look at that and think, oh wow, that's way too dark for my taste, don't worry, because it will dry lighter. I'll also show you at the end of the video those bits of cloth that I threw in to the leftover dye bath. You know, I added the other bits of onion skin that I had. And there's my bit of, I've got another little pot to put my bits of iron in, keep them safe, because obviously you can use those again and again. So that's the outer wrapping cloth. We'll see how the cardboard fared. Let's look at this first. Look at that. Wow, that's beautiful. You see that? Look at that. The colours in that. So all this cloth, will give it a little gentle rinse first, just to get the iron out of it and the leftover dye that hasn't attached. And then I wash it in water with some, you can either use a laundry liquid or a laundry product that you're 100% certain doesn't have whitening agents in, or what I use is vegetable soap. So you can either grater up some vegetable soap, or you can just rub it in your hands in the water as if you're washing your hands. Don't need very much. Right, that's cardboard. Whoop. So this was the back of the sketchbook, if you remember. And there's an oak print. A field maple, which usually doesn't print that well. Can be variable. It's a faint print. Oops, sorry. Ding ding. And there's another oak. See, that's printed nicely. Now obviously that's all lumpy and bumpy, But the same with the paper, I just rinse it. If you've used a lot of iron, you can, if you like, put a bit of bicarbonate of soda in the water to neutralise the acid. I tend not to bother really for this kind of thing. I just give it a good wash. People ask about things being archival. I'm not worried about things being archival. You know, they'll last my lifetime. I don't think they need to really last any longer. There's a bit of lace that's just got lovely colour on it. It'll stay to my hands now. So this is paper. The oaks printed nicely. And this was a piece of paper that was folded. It's a little bit like archaeology as well. Just have to pay attention and be a little bit careful. See the yellowy colours, that's because of the alum in the cloth. Obviously that's transferred a little bit to the paper. I need to open this very carefully. Now I'm careful, but if it rips I don't mind, because it will add texture to the journal, and if it really disintegrates it can become collage material. To me that just makes it more interesting. I'll just get those leaves off. See, there's still water in there, and if I found that the leaves were sticking I would add more water, because I find that that unsticks them better than you know, letting them dry. I find if they dry they stick on. That's a beautiful piece of paper. The paper at the moment I'm just laying it in a stack. Once I've rinsed it I'll lay it out. I don't know where yet. In my little studio somehow, in a single layer to dry. An oak print. Now this will be much more subdued than I normally do because I didn't add the iron apart from the few little rusty bits and the bits in the water, but that was the look I was going for. If you want it really dark, you know, black tannin and iron reactions, then I would do, like I suggested, paint the paper with your rusty water that you've made, which you make just by soaking some rusty scrap in water. You can add a glug of vinegar to help with the oxidation process. Any vinegar will do. And then leave it for a few weeks. But I wanted to do a more subtle variation for a change. Oh, that's printed beautifully, that dogwood. Now I find as things dry, as you wash and dry them, the prints become paler but more distinct, if that makes sense. You'll see. I'll show you it all washed and dried at the end. Well, that oak's done well as well. Look at the marks on there. But there was quite a small amount of iron in this because I only had those little bits that I scrounged from a friend. Oh, this is a bit of paper coming. Oh, this is the lady. Oh, she's got a line across her face from a nail underneath. So this, like I said, was when I made the bundle, is just regular copy paper, so it will be fragile, but it's manageable if you're careful. So I lift the edge and then I get hold of it kind of further in and just gently peel it back. So that's the lady. She's got that line through her face. Let me show you the back. Look at the back. The back's lovely. Lovely print from the dogwood again. You see all the colours in there: green, yellow, browns, purples. There is colour to be had in eco-printing. It's not all browns. It's more subtle, of course, than synthetic colours. It's just what you like, really. I hope my head's not coming in. So this is the broderie anglaise under the leaves. And I find as well, even if things haven't printed as such, they will have added something to the mix. They'll have added their tannin and the other chemicals that are in them. And if you find that when your cloths are washed and dried that they're really too subtle and you do want them stronger, just print them again. And those can be my favourite pieces, the ones that you know, I print again and again. You don't have to mordant them again. Once they've been mordanted, that's it. But you could just print them, overprint them. That's beautiful, that piece of broderie anglaise. You see the dogwood there? And here, from the iron, you see the iron makes these black marks. That's a reaction with the tannin in the leaves. And I like to have these odd shaped bits of cloth as well, because it just adds interest when I eventually come to make the journal. So this was an oak and a bit of, and some maple, and then some bits of lace in here, which will have just been coloured on the edges. And that's been beautifully coloured by those two rusty bits. So I guess this whole process really, from, you know, starting with the paper and cloth and doing the eco-printing and eventually doing the journaling, could be called slow journaling. I'll share the, you know, as I make the journal with you, but I think that is going to be over quite some time. Green from the dog rose there on this little bit of old sheet. Wow. See the greenish colour there? And then the darker from the rust and the oak. Imagine that as a little page in a journal. It's a great big dogwood leaf, sorry. Some more bits of rust. This is paper coming up, so being a bit careful. What you could do if you've got one of those plant spray things, or just a jug with some water standing by, you could just slosh a bit of water on with your hand if you find it drying out. No, that goes there. You see there, the ring has printed on the leaf, and that leaf's got beautiful. I think I'm going to keep that leaf because I could wax that and include that in my journal as well. So if particularly nice leaves come off, think of setting those to one side to use as well. This is, I think this was sketchbook paper. So as I pull, if I feel resistance, if I feel it sticking, that's when I might just slosh some water in there, just with my hand. If I had a little bowl of water, I could just slosh water in there. I think I'm okay. I think it's still wet enough. Right, is that a fold? Yes, that's a folded piece. So you just have to be, you know, wet paper is fragile. But at the same time, say to yourself, don't worry if it tears, it's just giving me more possibilities for, you know, using it as collage or mending it in some way. An S shape there from that little piece of rusted metal. You see how careful I'm being. Look at that. So I've just got one pile of paper and one pile of cloth. I'm just literally piling them one on top of the other gently. So this is a piece of cloth. I think that was the long bit that I folded kind of concertina style. It's that way. There we go. And again, having, you know, not cutting, you could of course just cut yourself pieces of paper and cloth all the same, square or rectangle, whatever size your bits of cardboard were. But I just find it much more visually interesting to have different shapes. And that helps me as well when I start journaling, because I've got something to go on, you know, I can be inspired by the shapes and dimensions of the cloth and the paper. rather than just having square. But if you think you prefer a square journal with all the pages the same size, then, you know, as always, you do you. So I think that's the red maple, and I think they were too far gone indeed. But never mind, they'll have added something, like I said. Lovely marks on that long thin piece. Oh, there's another one that's got a mark on. I might set that to one side as well. And what I'd do with those is I'll put them between some kitchen paper, or ideally the greaseproof paper or the baking parchment paper. It's called different things in different countries. You know, the non-stick paper that you use to line cake tins. If you had some of that, you could lay it between layers of that and then put a book or something on so it dried nice and flat. I might keep that oak leaf as well. Can't keep all the leaves, Catherine. Well, I guess I can keep all the leaves if I want to. You can always keep them and press them, and if when they dry you think they're not that remarkable after all, then at that point you can consign them to the compost. There's another, I think that was that piece of cardstock. I'm going to show you something in a minute that I just spied. Again, carefully peeling it open. A little bit of serendipity when I turn this over. Again, that dogwood's got the impression of the rusty bit on it, so that's going in the save pile. Yeah, that's the red maple. It's very, very faint. I would, if I'd caught it earlier, the leaves, I would have had more of an imprint than that, but you know, it's okay, it's part of the process. That's still a beautiful page. Now, well, there, look. Do you see? In the next layer was this lace, and it's printed onto there. Do you see that? So it's acted as a resist, or it's sucked in the tannin and iron and concentrated it in that area. So that's a little serendipitous byproduct of putting the lace in there. Lovely, lovely, lovely jubbly. And the lace itself has gone, remember it was cream, it's gone a sort of old gold colour with darker bits along it. So I'll put that in a pile on its own. This is the music paper, so this is vintage paper, it was given to me by a friend of mine. So you see, I try anything and everything paper-wise. People say, what paper should I use? I always say, anything and everything. Unless you want to be sure that it's going to stay intact without any worries, and you know, the idea of doing this and having to be careful and it might tear and all that isn't your bag, then use a sturdy watercolour paper or cardi paper or a heavyweight sketchbook paper. But if you have a more kind of experimental approach to it, you can use literally any kind of paper you like. And do a bundle with lots of different ones, and then from that you can learn. You know, you can see which ones you like and which ones you aren't so keen on, and then next time you can, you know, adjust accordingly what you use. But you see, although this was vintage, quite fragile music paper, it's behaving all right, considering it's been boiled for an hour and a half. Rusty bits, and obviously the rusty bits, did I say you can use them again and again. And the rose is printed green there as well on the paper. The same with the leaves. I always try to include something that I'm fairly sure is going to give me something. Like in this case it was the oaks I was pretty confident of. Some of the maples I was confident of and some not. But if you use a variety of leaves, again and observe, and that can vary. Like with the maples, if I'd been maybe a few days or a week earlier, I think I'd have had a stronger print from them. It's because they were red and starting to dry on the ground. Dogwood it's there. It's not as strong as I would have thought. It can also, I mean, I noticed differences when I first went to France. I noticed differences there with how things printed, and even within the same forest, even within the same tree. Leaves from one side of the tree, depending on how much sun and so on it got, may print differently from leaves on the other side, because there are so many variables. So it's just getting to know the leaves that work for you in your environment on the whole, and that is only really by experimenting, and times of year. Autumn generally, because the tannin's highest, is the best time. But I've also had that's better from the dogwood. I've also had very successful prints from spring leaves. So, this is a lovely little piece. Look at this. See, that was a bit of vintage linen. I can see all kinds of colours in there: orange, green, yellow, purple. A little bit of string mark because it was hanging out the edge. So, you know, I really don't mind things hanging out of the edge, because you get little things like that happening where it got caught up in the string. And that lovely dogwood print there. And also on different cloths, and not even on cotton and linen, but on different kinds of cotton or on different kinds of linen, you might get different results. So again, that's why I like to put this variety in. That oak leaf has got the imprint of that funny shaped bit of metal on it. Can I unstick it from its friends? Yes, so I think I'm going to save that as well. Oh, that's done well. And this was a bit of magazine page, I think, with the lady's knitting hands on. So if I've got a folded double page like that, I try and get the whole page up first in my hand. And I didn't put anything in the middle, did I? Because I didn't want to print over the lady's hands especially. Something might have gone through. But I'm still going to open it up rather than let it dry stuck together, because I think it will be harder to get apart. There we go. So I can still just see the lady's knitting hands in the middle of the print of the iron pieces, but it's made a really interesting shape. We'll see when it dries. So I'm getting down to the bottom now. This is another piece of linen, another dogwood that's printed well. Lovely big rusty ring. You can, of course, if you try with no rust at all, you won't get this dark. You'll get much more of the yellow from the alum. Well, it's not the alum that's dying yellow. The addition of the alum encourages the yellow chemicals in the leaves to predominate. The linen has done so well, and I have a feeling that the linen reacts better with the alum lactate than it did with the alum acetate, although it might be because I'm in a different country, or it might be that I misremember. You know, there's so many variables, like I say. It's interesting to speculate about these things, to me at least, but it's not, you know, I never think of something as a success or a fail. It's just what has happened that time. Right, and this is my last piece, which is the other piece of cardboard. Oh, the wild rose is printed well on there. If a leaf struggles to come up, if you sort of roll it with your fingertip like that, that can be a good way of getting it off. Just roll it rather than trying to pull it up. Deciduous tree leaves and bushes like roses and so on, or climbers, are more substantial. There are also some herbaceous perennials that you can print with, hardy geraniums, Alchemilla mollis, sage leaves, that's a bush as well. But they can be more fragile when they're wet, and then you could, if bits of leaf stayed on, just leave them until it's dry and then try and brush them off if they won't float off with the water. Oh, that maple's given distinct green in there. I don't know if you can see it. Hopefully it will show up more when it's dry, and there's the rose again. So I'm going to go and rinse all this and lay it all out flat. Now things like this will curl as it dries, so what I do is I lay all the paper out in a single layer if I can find the space, and let it dry, and then when it's nearly dry I put something over the top, again such as the parchment baking paper, and then put heavy books on. I know some people then iron their papers. I find that if I iron them they tend to curl up even more. I don't mind them a little bit rumply. I mean, you know, by all means try if you want to try ironing them. But I think it's best to lay them flat until they're all but dry and then put something heavy on them. So at that point you could layer them, you know, when they're nearly dry, just make a stack and then put some parchment paper, baking paper, greaseproof paper, whatever it's called, and then some heavy books, and then just leave that for, you know, overnight or something. And for the cloth I'm going to just rinse it all through and then wash it with the little bit of the hand soap, the vegetable soap, give it a brief rinse again, and then dry it, because it's for a journal, so, you know, that'll be clean enough. I mean, if you really want to neutralise the iron, you want to put it in some hot water with a sort of a big tablespoon of bicarbonate of soda, and give it a really good, let it soak for half an hour or so, even overnight is no problem, and then give it a good wash afterwards. But you do wash it, and don't panic that dye comes out. The dye that comes out was never fixed to the cloth and never can be. You have to get the water running clear. Okay, so I'm going to go and do that. I don't think you need to watch me washing. I'm going to go and do that, get everything dry, and then I'll be back tomorrow for me, but in no time at all for you, and show you everything dried and pressed, and also I'll show you the other bits of cloth that I threw in at the end. And I can't turn the camera off because I've got dirty hands, but I'll edit out the bit where I go and wash my hands and come back to turn the camera off. Okay, so I'll see you again in no time at all. Okay, I've washed all the rinsed the papers and washed all the cloth through, and they're all drying, and I was about to put the dye bath outside because I will save that and use that again, and I had some papers left that I hadn't put in the Ecoprint bundle, so I just tipped some of the dye bath, it's stone cold, into my my tray, and I've put the papers in it, and I'm just going to leave them there overnight and see what happens, basically. So I'll show you everything washed, dried and so on in a little while. For me it'll be tomorrow. Okay, so here goes the reveal. I'll get things in one at a time to show you. So these, or not every item one at a time, but you know, that would take forever. So these were the papers that I showed you just no time at all ago for you, that I just put in the tray with some of the liquid from the dye bath poured over them, and I left them overnight, and then I've got them out and I did iron them a little bit, they're still a bit damp, and now I'm going to put them under a heavy book. But you see the variation of colour. I mean, they all had the same treatment. I think that piece had been tea dyed already, so that's obviously darker. And then the book pages just got kind of knocked back a bit, but then on that side it's got some nice marks on. And I think because I'm planning a journal with all this stuff, it's nice to have some plain pages in case I want to write or sketch or, you know, whatever. So that's why I liked to, that's why I did this. So there's the postcard, book page again, just a little bit grunged. And again, I like these pages in these old books sometimes that have got these, you know, drawings on them. There's a word for them. Plates? Is it called a plate? I don't know. I should know. Trained librarian. I do know, I've just forgotten. That was a bit of sketchbook paper. So it's a different colour to tea dyeing. It's more purpley, mushroomy colour. That was some cardstock. And this was some other sketchbook paper. So you see they're a bit rumply and crumply, but I shall put them under a heavy book and squish them flat. So So that was those. These are the cloths that I threw in to the pan. So this was, some of this was the mordanted cloth that didn't make it into the bundle, so that's a bit of rick-rack. I hope the colour's showing up. It's kind of a greeny gold, I would describe it as. This has come out lovely. This was that long piece of linen selvage with the little flower print on. And it's just a beautiful colour. It's, yeah, really greeny gold. Now the blotching, you see that the colour's not even. I like that, but I'll explain why that's happened and how that's happened and how not to have it happen if you don't like it. If you don't want that to happen, don't do what I did and just chuck the cloth in the pan with all the dye material still in. This one is especially blotchy. To me those are beautiful marks, but you know, if to you that's an imperfect result and you prefer it to be all one colour, what I would do is I would boil up the dye stuff for the designated amount of time. For soft dye material like onion skins, that's half an hour. And then I would strain the dye stuff out through a sieve or something, and then return the hot dye bath to the pan, bring that back up to the boil, and then put the cloth in. And then I would make sure that I didn't cram the pan full of cloth. I would just put small bits so they had room to move about. And then I would really move them about well so that they all took up, you know, an even amount of the dye material. And then I would then simmer that for half an hour, and then you would get less blotchy results. This is blotchy because in some parts it's touched rust, in some parts it's touched a bit of a leaf, in some parts it's touched onion skin, and in other parts it's just sucked up the liquid itself. But yeah, I mean, I like that, so I do that deliberately. It's just what you like. I mean, to me, look at those lovely marks there. But you know, each to their own. This is a piece of silk that wasn't mordanted, that I just had laying about, so I put that in as well. This was a piece of linen with the cutwork in that had been mordanted. You see there's quite distinct yellow blotches on there. Maybe if I turn it that way. But I like that. I keep saying it, but I do. I just think that's come out lovely. Some crochet lace, also mordanted. All the cotton and linen was mordanted in the same way as it was meant for the bundle. That's a little bit of cotton trim, again mordanted. The other thing, like I said, I think earlier, that's both cotton. They're both very similar in colour, but this is slightly lighter than the crochet. It's taken the dye ups in a slightly different way, and that's linen. So this is where I like using all little bits of different cloths rather than, you know, putting one great big piece of cloth in, because of the variation in the results you get from the one pan. So I'm going to make one project with all of this. I'll have lots of variety in colours and textures and marks and so on, but everything's come out of one dye pot. And, you know, that's what I like. So these were two little bits of silk noil. You see how dark they are, that I threw into the pan. The proteins, you know, even though this is mordanted, the proteins will still always, or usually, give you darker results. This was a piece of mordanted linen that I just love. The variation of marks on that. To me, this is another kind of eco-printing. You know, the idea of throwing it in the pan with the dye stuff in there so that you get these variations. And now this piece of woolly blanket I put in after all those other bits had been in for a while, because woolly blanket's very greedy. And if you put that in first, it'll suck up all the colour for itself and won't leave anything for the rest. But even though this went in last, you see how rich the colour is. So that was those bits. So those were the bits, just to recap, that were thrown in, brought up to a simmer for half an hour, the heat was turned off, it was left overnight, and then the next day I got them out, rinsed them and dried them. So I've shown you that and the papers. Now so here's next is what was in the bundle itself, the Ecoprint bundle. So this is the string, some of the string that I've washed because it's just gone a lovely colour, and I want to use that in the journal. And I also saved all those little bits that I cut. And that's that same kind of old gold colour. I hope it's showing up on the camera. These are all the leaves that I saved, that I've just rinsed and pressed. They'll go back to be pressed because they're still, you know, they're not dried out fully. So I'll put them back between a couple of pieces of paper under a book until I'm ready to make the journal. And then when I make the journal, I'll obviously share that here. And there's a video somewhere of me waxing leaves, but I'll talk about how I treat them to preserve them in a journal. Look at that oak with that lovely mark on. And this was the maple, which was the first one that I decided to save. There's another oak. So those are my leaves. And here are the cloths. So this is a piece of lace which has got printed with the metal rings. This was the little bag that came from India, which was on the outside, so it's got all the lovely string marks on it and this rich yellow colour. And because it is a bag and I just kept it as one, it's still a bag, so that will be interesting to use in a journal in some way, because it, you know, it's a pocket, or, you know, you can trap things between the layers. We'll see when we get there, but it gives you possibilities. This was some cotton sheet that didn't have much in the way of iron on it, so it stayed quite pale, but you see there the oak leaf. There's another oak leaf. There's a dogwood. And there's a different species of oak. And there's a little bit of wild rose there. And then the other side did have more iron, so there's some of those black marks here and there, but still not much. No, not really, it was just there really. That was probably a nail and a washer. But there is a maple. And I think that's part of a maple as well. A bit of dogwood and another bit of dogwood. So again, because of the different cloths, I've got all this variation. If you just put in one big piece of cotton or one big piece of linen, your cloth will be fairly similar all over. I mean, within, you know, eco-printing always gives variation, but you get much more variety if you use different cloths, if you have different cloths. And this little piece is lovely. This is a bit of old flannelette sheet or flannel sheet. So there's the oak leaf and the wild rose, which has really printed green. See how green that is? And the dark rings, the dark marks from the washers. And then the other side has got a big dogwood leaf on it. And within that dogwood leaf I can see all colours from orange, yellow, green, purpley greys from, you know, where it's nearer to the rust. I just love them in that, just as a little page. It's lovely to me. This is not, I called it broderie anglaise, it's not. It looks like it's cotton that somebody's just stitched over the surface of. It's not really broderie anglaise, little flowers, but it's come out quite nicely. Because on the back you can see there's been tension issues. I assume it was commercially produced, I'm not sure. But you get this, it's called eyelashes. It's actually a mistake if you're free motion quilting. You get eyelashes. Why am I doing air quotes around eyelashes? When you get eyelashes on the back, it's seen as a mistake because your tension's wrong. But it's lovely texture on this little scrap. And here's some of the lace, which, like I said when I was making the bundle, haven't printed as such, but they've picked up colour and just become more interesting, to me at least. This piece of lace has gone a beautiful gold colour. Do you see that against my hand? Against my still quite dirty hand. I have washed my hands. It's just, I just love that colour. That kind of old gold, and then little bits of the darkness here and there where it's touched the rust. This piece of lace was the fine lace, which has picked up some colour. And I love these fine laces because you can put things behind, you know, and build up layers, like for example that. So things can be hidden or partly hidden by the lace. And you can trap things in there that maybe you wouldn't want to stitch through. You could trap something and then just stitch around the edge. So I always look out for those when I'm thrifting. It's another long thin piece of cotton. with some quite lovely rusty marks on. And there's some quite faint leaf prints on the back. It's quite a thin open weave. I think that's why the leaves haven't printed very distinctly, but it's still a beautiful piece of cloth. And this is linen. Now this was the linen that where the end hung out and it got the string marks. And I just love that. And there's an oak leaf, and the wild rose on there is printed really green again. Do you see that? You see the wild rose? And then the other side there's some dogwood and a little maple. This is linen again. This is really yellow, this piece. So there's a big dogwood leaf in the middle and some rusty imprints around the edge. On the other side there's another dogwood and maple that have also come out quite greeny yellow. And these colours, I think I said it already, they're brought out of the leaves by the alum mordant. There are all kinds of different mordants that you can use that bring out different colours within the leaves, but we're doing alum, so we're not going to go down a huge mordanting rabbit hole and confuse you all even more. And this was the outer wrapping cloth. So this has also got a lot of colour from the onion skins, some of that sort of greenish gold colour, and beautiful string marks. I just love this cloth. And there it's picked up some rose leaves. And now the papers. So here's the lady. She's got this rusty nail print across her eye, but I quite like that. I think she kind of looks like a pirate now. I don't know. And then the backside printed nicely as well. And this is a lovely maple print on this piece of sketchbook paper. It was folded and it tore when I was washing it, so I just let it tear. And on the other side is a lovely big oak leaf. And this one also has got them, I think that's 2 maples. And a lovely oak leaf. This was the knitting hands, upside down. I love that the hands are visible in the middle, and here are the lines of the knitting needles that were on the magazine picture, but then they're kind of becoming part of the dark lines. I didn't do that deliberately, that have been left by the rusty bits. And it's made a really interesting image. And the back of it's also eco-printed, you know, with the, because this was the side where I put them. Those just soaked through from the other side, if you remember. Excuse me. So that's, you know, even though that was a picture of some chairs and that's a horse with a man trying to get on its back and an old door, it's just become an interesting page. I'm not sure about the writing, but you can always, you know, collage something over it or paint over it or whatever. We'll see when we come to make the journal. But it's an interesting starting point for a page. This was some sketchbook paper. The stars of this piece really are those rusty bits, especially this S shape. But there's lovely kind of like water splash marks, I call them, when the leaf almost looks like, you know, when you drop ink in water and it does that. Ink splash, I suppose, would be better. Well, that's a really lovely page as well. And a nice big long one, so that gives me the different shapes as well. I think I said that already, gives me ideas in my journal. Now there is that lace print. You can see it more clearly, I hope, now it's dry. Do you see there? That piece of lace that I folded up in there, that I've already shown you. You know the piece of lace I mean. I don't have to dig it out. That long piece of lace is printed onto the paper. That's just lovely. And there's some rose leaves and, you know, rusty marks. It's a lovely page. And here is the vintage music paper. You see it stayed perfectly intact. I think this was near the edge. Anyway, it's got a lot of the onion colour has seeped in from the edges. And that's really nice, and some leaf prints on it. And on the other side there's a lovely couple of rose leaves printed there and there. And some really nice rusty marks as well, another bit of rose leaf there. I'm really impressed with those roses, how they've printed so green. Green is not commonly achieved. It's more commonly achieved with alum. If I'd put loads of iron in there, they would have printed more purple-black. which is partly why I kept the iron sort of down to a minimum, because I wanted to get more of these sort of lighter colours. So that's that. The only other thing I haven't shown you is the cardboard, which I used at the outside, which was the back of a sketchbook. Now, I know there was 2, now there's 4, because they came in 2 halves. They're still wet. Obviously they're quite thick, so they're going to take some drying. But they came apart, so that one was stuck to that one. That was one piece of cardboard. But I've let that happen because they'll dry quicker. And then I can either keep them as 4 or I can just glue them back together when they're dry. They feel almost like leather at the moment. And the printing on them is this sort of purplish. This is tannin iron, probably because there was tannin in the water. So you get this purplish darkness. I like this one, which has got some green in it as well. But until it's completely dry, I can't really judge. So I'm just letting those dry. I'll keep an eye on them, and when they seem to be nearly dry, then I'll put a weight on them. I don't want to put a weight on them now, they need to dry properly first. And this one as well, although it's quite, plain here, I love these lines of the leaf vein and the oak. So I don't know how I'm going to incorporate them. I think originally I thought maybe it would be the cover. Now I'm thinking I don't want a square journal, I want a portrait one. I don't know why, but we'll see when we get to making the journal. We've got all these options now. So I've got those, I've got my Ecoprint papers, I've got my Ecoprint cloths and laces, I've got my papers that I just dipped in the dye bath, and I've got my cloths and laces that I threw in the dye bath and got the colour with. So if I just try and put it so you can see, do you see? I've got this lovely array of stuff to inspire me, and then I've got my string and I've got my leaves to inspire me to create a journal. So that will be coming soon. Just before I end off, I'll leave that there because it's so yummy. I think I'm going to make a journal using an old book cover. Now I'm lucky that when I was in France I came across a huge box of old books, and they're nothing special. I've googled them all. I'm a trained librarian. I would not cut up a first edition of something rare. I always say this because sometimes you get people being negative about trashing books. 92 million books per year end up in landfill. They're not easily recyclable because of the different materials in them. So all that being said, here are some old books. I will be trashing one of them. So I've got a few options. So I've got this one. Probably I'm just going to use the covers and make a wider spine, because none of my journals will never be that thin, and certainly not if I use this one, because that's got a really thin spine. So when I get to the journal making side of it, this, some child scribbled in it. But these books were produced in their hundreds of thousands, and I Google every title and check that it's not a first edition or anything special. These were just sort of school books. But I just love that cover. So that is a strong possibility. This one is like an exercise book. It's got someone's handwriting, and all the pages I will use as well, all the special ones, like this with the person's handwriting on. So that's very thin, but I can just take the covers off and give it a wider spine, and I like the colour of that as well. And then I've got this, I've got a few of these. These are volumes of Plutarch, but again, the lycée is college in French. This was a school book version. It's nothing, it's nothing special. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's rare or particularly valuable, in inverted commas. So one of those, that's slightly bigger. So I'll decide. I just wanted to show you them. And if you want to follow along with the journal and you don't have, old books, maybe you could start having a look in junk shops, thrift shops, or on eBay, or around your own home, or it could even be a new book that you've read already, a new hardback book that you've read already that's got a nice looking cover and it's nothing special, it's just a novel or something. I don't see any harm in it if you really can't bring yourself to do that, or you don't want to do that, of course you can just use cardboard or have a soft cloth cover. So anyway, so that was Ecoprinting part 1 and 2. Coming soon will be the journal making project. I'm not sure exactly when or where, but obviously if you're subscribed and you've got notifications on, you'll see it, and I will also give a heads up in the Facebook group and on my social media when it does come around. So all that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it useful and enjoyable, and I hope some of you are inspired to make a journal with me. I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.